What if the problem was never that you have failed to manifest your desire? What if the problem is that the old version of you is still alive, still speaking, still expecting, still occupying the seat that the new version was meant to take? There is a quiet truth that the most advanced students of imagination eventually discover. Reality does not respond to your desires. Reality responds to your identity. And as long as the old identity remains intact, no amount of visualization, affirmation, or effort will produce the change you are seeking. The world is faithful to one thing, only the self you accept as yours. Stay with me to the end of this message, because what follows may explain every manifestation that has not yet arrived, every prayer that has not yet been answered, every door that seems mysteriously stuck. The answer is not to push harder. The answer is not to want more. The answer is to delete the old self, to end it, to release it, to allow it to die so that the new self can finally occupy the space reality has been waiting for it to claim. When you change who you are, reality has no choice but to catch up. Most people approach manifestation as an act of addition. They believe that if they could simply add the right technique, the right ritual, the right affirmation, the right belief, the right amount of effort, then the desire would appear. They treat their inner life like a workshop, constantly bringing in new tools, new methods, new teachers, hoping that the next edition will finally unlock the door. And yet the door remains closed. They cannot understand why. They have done so much. They have read the books. They have followed the practices. They have repeated the affirmations until the words have lost their meaning. They have visualized until the image flickers and fades from sheer exhaustion. They have prayed. They have asked. They have believed, or at least they have tried to believe. But still nothing changes. This is because the work was never about adding. The work was always about removing. You cannot become the new self while still inhabiting the old. You cannot wear the new identity over the old one like an extra coat. The old self is not a layer to be covered. The old self is the very floor you are standing on, and as long as you remain standing on it, no new structure can rise. Every old habit, every old assumption, every old story about who you are, every old explanation of why your life looks the way it does, these are not the architecture of the new self. They are the architecture of the one you are trying to leave. You cannot remodel the old house into the new mansion. The old house has to come down. And here is the deeper truth that almost no one speaks of. The old self does not leave on its own. It does not gracefully step aside the moment you announce a new desire. It clings. It defends itself. It speaks in your voice. It reminds you of your history. It quotes your past evidence. It builds its case from every disappointment you have ever experienced. Until you make the decision to delete it, the old self will continue to author your tomorrow with the same hand that authored your yesterday. Here is what changes everything. The new self you are trying to become is not somewhere ahead of you, waiting to be earned. The new self is already within you, waiting to be uncovered. You do not have to construct it. You only have to allow it to emerge, and it cannot emerge while the old self is still in the way. This is the great inversion that most people miss. Manifestation is not the addition of a new identity, it is the deletion of an old one. The deletion is the manifestation. Once the old self is truly gone, the new self moves into its place automatically, and the world rearranges itself with quiet inevitability around the identity that now occupies the seat of consciousness. This is why reality always seems to be lagging behind your desires. The lag is not a delay in the universe. The lag is the time it takes for you to fully release the version of yourself that no longer matches what you are claiming. The world cannot deliver to a self that no longer exists. The world cannot deliver to a self that has not yet been allowed to exist. So the work is to end the one and to allow the other. Most people are unwilling to do this. They want the new life without ending the old self. They want the new relationship while still being the wounded version of themselves. They want the new abundance while still being the one who watches every dollar with fear. They want the new health while still being the one who identifies with the diagnosis. They want the new opportunity while still being the one who explains their limitations. But the world is honest. The world will not contradict the identity you continue to occupy. If you remain the one who has not yet received, the world will continue to be the place where you have not yet received. If you remain the one who is broken, the world will continue to be the place where you are broken. If you remain the one who lacks, the world will continue to be the place where you lack. To experience the new, you must end the one for whom the old was true. This is not symbolic. This is the operative law of imagination. The self you accept as yours is the law of your world. Change the self, and the law changes. Change the law, and the world has no option but to respond. Think of an actor who has played the same role for 40 years. He knows every line. He knows every gesture. The role has become so familiar that even off stage he begins to walk like the character, speak like the character, react like the character. The role has become his identity. And as long as he remains in that role, the audience can never see him as anyone else. The reviews are written about the character. The praise belongs to the character. The reputation belongs to the character. To become a new actor, to play a new role, he must first leave the old one entirely. Not partially, not on weekends, not when he feels like it. He must step off the stage of the old play, take off the costume, remove the makeup, and walk into a new theater as someone who has never played that role before. You are that actor. You have played the role of the old self for so long that even your inner life walks like the character. You repeat the lines. You react in the familiar ways. You expect the familiar outcomes, and the audience of reality writes its reviews accordingly. As long as you remain in the role, reality has no choice but to respond to the character you keep performing. To meet the new life, the role must end. Or consider the snake. A snake does not become a new snake by adding a new layer of skin on top of the old. The old skin must split. It must rupture. It must be left behind. And until it is, the new skin beneath cannot breathe. The new skin cannot grow. The new skin cannot fully exist. You are like the snake. The new self is already beneath the surface. It is fully formed, fully ready, waiting only for the old skin to release its grip. And the old skin will not release on its own. It must be shed, deliberately, by you. Or consider the wax tablet. In ancient times, before paper was common, students wrote upon tablets of wax. When a lesson was finished, the wax was smoothed clean so that a new lesson could be written. If the old writing remained, the new writing would be illegible, a chaos of overlapping marks, neither one nor the other. Your consciousness is the tablet. The old self is the previous writing. As long as the old writing remains, the new self cannot be inscribed clearly upon the surface of your awareness. The smoothing must come first. The forgetting must come first. The deletion must come first. Or consider the traveler returning home from a long journey. He arrives at the door of his house, covered in the dust of the road. He cannot enter his bedroom in those clothes. He cannot lie down upon the clean linens, carrying the dirt of where he has been. He must first remove the road clothes. He must wash. He must put on the garments of home. The new life is the bedroom. The old self is the dust. You cannot enter the one while still wearing the other. So how do you actually delete the old self? Not by fighting it, not by hating it, not by punishing it. The old self has been with you a long time, and it has only ever been doing what it knew. To attack it is to feed it. To resist it is to confirm it. The deletion happens not through war, but through quiet, deliberate withdrawal. You delete the old self by no longer speaking from it. This is the first practice. Notice the inner conversation. Notice the words that arise when you are unguarded. Notice the explanations you offer when someone asks about your life. Notice the stories you tell yourself when no one is listening. Almost all of this is the voice of the old self, repeating its familiar script, reinforcing its familiar identity. You do not have to argue with this voice. You only have to stop speaking from it. When the old voice says, "I am the one who never gets the break," you do not contradict it. You simply do not repeat it. You let the sentence rise and fall in the silence of your awareness, without giving it the energy of your agreement. When the old voice says, "Look how nothing ever changes," you do not respond. You let it pass through, and you return to the inner posture of the new self, who knows that the visible world is the last to receive the news of what consciousness has already accepted. You delete the old self by no longer rehearsing its past. The old self lives by repeating its history. It loves to revisit the disappointments. It loves to reread the rejections. It loves to recount the moments when life confirmed its fears. Every time you tell those stories, even silently, even to yourself, you are reinstalling the old self. You are giving it new life. You are keeping it on the throne. Stop telling the stories. Not violently, not with strain. Simply allow them to fall away from your inner speech. Replace them with the silence of one who has nothing to defend. You delete the old self by no longer planning from its perspective. The old self plans cautiously. It plans defensively. It plans from a place of in case things go wrong. Notice this. Whenever your planning carries the flavor of bracing for disappointment, you are planning as the old self. The new self plans differently. The new self plans from the assumption of fulfillment. The new self speaks in terms of when rather than if. The new self prepares for the arrival of what has already been accepted. And finally, you delete the old self by entering sleep as someone else. This is the most powerful practice of all. Each night, as you drift into sleep, you have the opportunity to release the day's identity and assume a new one. Do not enter sleep as the worried self, the waiting self, the still incomplete self. Enter sleep as the one who has already received, the one who has already become, the one for whom the matter is finished. Whatever identity occupies your consciousness in the final moments before sleep is the identity that takes root in the deeper soil of your being while you rest. Repeat this for night after night, and the old self begins to dissolve, replaced by an identity that the waking world will eventually be forced to confirm. The deletion is not a single event. It is a daily, deliberate, gentle withdrawal of energy from the old, and a daily, deliberate, gentle investment of energy in the new. Do this consistently, and the old self will quietly leave, not with drama, not with announcement. It will simply no longer be there. Now, notice what happens once the old self is truly gone. You begin to behave differently without trying. The reactions that used to be automatic no longer arise. The fears that used to control you no longer have a place to land. The familiar disappointments are no longer rehearsed, because the rehearser has stepped off stage. There is a quiet, almost startling sense of having become someone you have not been before. This is not pretending. This is not performance. This is the natural emergence of the self that was always beneath the old one, finally allowed to breathe. And the world begins to notice. People begin to treat you differently. They cannot explain why. There is no new haircut, no new wardrobe, no new resume. But something in their unconscious perception has registered a change, and they respond accordingly. They speak to you differently. They consider you differently. They include you in possibilities you were not previously included in. This is not coincidence. This is the world catching up. Reality is always catching up. The lag is the only thing that has ever stood between desire and fulfillment, and the lag is not the fault of the universe. It is the time required for the outer world to discover what the inner world has already become. Some people will resist this idea. They will say, "But surely my circumstances are objective. Surely the bank account, the job, the diagnosis, the relationship, surely these have a reality independent of who I am." But notice, circumstances are always changing. People are always being born into new ones, lifted out of old ones, surprised by reversals, blessed by unexpected turns. The world is far less fixed than the old self insisted it was. The old self needed the world to feel fixed, because the old self could not survive in a world where identity actually moves things. The new self knows the truth. Circumstances are responsive. They are the surface of a sea whose depths are governed by the identity of the one who sails it. You do not have to bend the sea. You only have to be a different sailor. The sea adjusts. And here is something worth pausing on. The new self does not boast. The new self does not announce itself. The new self does not need to convince anyone of its existence. It simply lives. It simply moves. It simply breathes the air of the new identity without explanation. The old self loved to explain. The old self loved to argue for its case. The old self loved to defend its narrative against any challenge. The new self has no such need. The new self has nothing to prove because the new self is not assembled from evidence. The new self is assumed. And what is assumed does not require defense. This is one of the great freedoms of the deletion. The exhausting work of defending the old self stops, because there is no longer an old self to defend. You may notice friends who do not recognize the new you. You may notice patterns that used to repeat in your life that no longer find a hook to land on. You may notice conversations that used to drain you, that no longer have the same effect, because the version of you they were directed at no longer exists. This can be disorienting at first. The old self had relationships, habits, routines, ways of moving through the world. When it leaves, there is a quiet emptiness while the new self settles in. Do not fear this emptiness. The emptiness is the space in which the new life is being written. Reality is gathering itself. Circumstances are realigning. People are being moved. Opportunities are being arranged. Conversations are being set in motion that you did not orchestrate. The whole quiet, invisible machinery of life is rearranging itself to confirm the identity that has now taken the seat of consciousness. The world is catching up. Let it. So as we come to the end of this message, take with you this single understanding. The work was never to add. The work was always to release. Stop trying to become the new self while still defending the old one. Stop trying to manifest the new life while still rehearsing the old story. Stop expecting reality to deliver to a version of you that you have not yet allowed to leave. Delete the old self, quietly, deliberately, without drama. By withdrawing your inner agreement from its voice, by no longer rehearsing its past, by no longer planning from its perspective, by entering sleep as someone else, by giving the new self the silent permission to occupy the seat of consciousness that has been held by the old one for too long. When the old voice rises within you and says, "But this is who I have always been," answer it gently. Say within yourself, "That is who I was. It is no longer who I am, and what I am now does not need to argue with what I was." When the world insists on reflecting the old self for a little while longer, do not be discouraged. The world is the last to receive the news. The world is catching up. The lag is the natural breath between the inner shift and the outer confirmation, and the lag always passes. When fear whispers that perhaps the old self was safer, perhaps you should return to it. Perhaps you do not deserve the new identity you are claiming. Answer fear with stillness. Fear is the voice of the old self trying to keep itself alive. You are no longer obligated to host it. Walk through your day as the new self. Speak as the new self. Plan as the new self. Respond to circumstances as the new self. Sleep as the new self. And do this with the quiet certainty that reality, however slowly it may seem to move, is faithful in its mirroring. The world cannot continue to deliver to a self that no longer exists. The world cannot continue to withhold from a self that has now taken its rightful place. One morning, you will look around and notice that nothing in your life looks quite the same as it did. The relationships will have shifted. The opportunities will have changed. The atmosphere of your days will carry a different quality, and you will know that the deletion was real. The new self has arrived, and reality, in its own faithful way, has caught up. You did not have to push. You did not have to force. You only had to release the one and allow the other. Delete the old self. Reality will follow.